Good morning, everyone. I hope that everyone you are well. So, on behalf of the organizing team here, it's absolute pleasure to welcome you on the Neuroscience Week 2025. You know, this is, let's say, it's not a conference. Actually, it's a celebration of minds, a convergence of science, innovation, and community, actually. And over the next 5 days, we are going to explore the brain from every angle, from brain-computer interface that we start today with Dr. Booker, neuroimaging, mental health, neuromarketing, creativity, and beyond. We have more than 50 speakers. We have organized here in the City College in Thessaloniki, which is the European campus of the University of York, hands-on workshops in the neuroscience lab and in the applied neuroscience lab, with live demonstration and so on, as well as, let's say, that's why we encourage, let's say, hybrid participation, either in physically here or online if you cannot be in Thessaloniki. Also, we are very proud to offer a program that is diverse and dynamic. So whether you are joining us online or you are in Thessaloniki, you are now part of, let's say, of this community, which is united by the curiosity and the passion for understanding the brain. We are especially welcome you, and we are excited about this interactive, let's say, about the interactive training session that we will have in EEG and NFNIRS in the next following days, as well as about some career development talks and the cutting-edge research on everyone from entrepreneurial neuroprofiles to eye tracking in consumer behavior, from dreams and consciousness to neuropsychological tools that can be applied in clinical practice. Also, today we are going to host an online event from the alumni of the Master of the Clinical Neuropsychology and Cognitive Neuropsychology. This starts at 3 o'clock, so be here to, let's say, to see how our students perform in their next steps and so on. So, now let me introduce you to our speaker, Dr. Christoph Kucker. Actually, just to check. So, Dr. Kucker is a very renowned scientist, and actually it's not only his science, but his sole, let's say, background and work he has done in helping all the scientific community worldwide to progress so their research as their clinical work, founding and leading one of the biggest, let's say, neurotech companies, namely GTech. And of course, he's one of the pioneers in brain-computer interfaces. So, Christoph, first of all, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And
good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you also. So, please, you can start.
Okay, I share my screen, including sound. Now you should already see it. I just swap my presentation. Just a moment. Oh, it looks good, isn't it? And you can also hear me. All good?
It's perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So today I will show you how you can use brain-computer interfaces for neurorehabilitation, mapping, assessment, and also communication. So I'm coming from GTech Medical Engineering in Austria. I'm sitting in Schiedlberg. That's a very small village, actually, where we are running research projects and international sales. We are producing all the hardware for our brain-computer interface technology in Graz. This is in the south, pretty close to Slovenia and Italy. Then we have also offices in Albany, in New York, in Barcelona, Vancouver, in Hong Kong, Sapporo, in Japan, in Newcastle, in Australia. And last year we started also in Cali, in Colombia, to take care of South America. We are running at the moment about 15 different research projects. They all have to do with brain-computer interfaces. And in recovery slag, for example, we are looking into brain-computer interface neurorehabilitation of gait if somebody had a stroke or multiple sclerosis or Parkinson. And yeah, there are much more. We have also happy customers, and they're coming from all different fields. Of course, many famous universities like Yale, Harvard, Stanford, City College, UCL, and many more. But you can also see that it's used in aviation from Airbus, BMW, Ford, and many other car manufacturers or airplane companies, but also the big ones like Google and Samsung and so on. They're using nowadays brain-computer interface technology. So brain-computer interfaces are measuring the EEG, the electroencephalogram, non-invasively of a subject or a patient. And then we can extract a control signal to control an external device in real time. And very important is the feedback loop. So you have to see or you have to feel what you're controlling in order to get better and to achieve higher classification accuracies. And if you're working with a neurosurgeon, then you can also implant ECOG grids, electrocorticogram grids, directly on the cortex. So in this case, you are removing the scalp, the dura mater, and then you can place the grids directly on the cortex to generate a control signal. And one of these devices is our Nautilus Pro that you can see here on the image. So in this case, the red little items on the cap are the electrodes, and they contain a biosignal amplified directly in the electrode. And on the back of the head, you can actually see the ADC, analog to digital converter, the wireless transmission, the battery. And in this case, the whole wireless unit is sitting on the head. It is very important because if you're moving the head, for example, then the whole system is moving with the head. And this is reducing artifacts a lot. And there's also a nice publication from Germany. They compared different EEG headsets with each other while a person was doing different tasks for 60 minutes. So like playing computer games, doing some cognitive tasks, so also moving around. Then you can see Chiara here with our Nautilus headset with the Ladybird electrodes. And you can see in the 60 minutes there are almost no segments with artifacts in the data. And this is super important because you don't want to lose any data just because of the headset is not good enough. And in the worst case, you can actually see that more than 50% of the data had artifacts. This makes a huge difference, especially when you're working with patients. Sometimes you get only 5 minutes for doing a recording, for example, with patients with disorders of consciousness. And if you're losing 3 out of 5 minutes, then of course this is exactly not what you want to have. Or if you're providing neurorehabilitation for stroke patients, then of course you don't want to lose half an hour of your recording. And this is what we mean under clean EEG data. So this is nicely demonstrated in the video here. The moment we are recording from 8 channels for Unicorn Hybrid Black. So here you can see the channels are in green. This means the data quality is good. This is the backyard of our company, and Martin is going to do a backflip. He jumps now. Look at the EEG data. About 100 to 200 milliseconds later, the data is clean again, and we can continue with the EEG recording even while Martin is walking. So many other headsets would just fly away. And with this unit, you can even do it doing a backflip. This changes, of course, everything what you can do nowadays with EEG technology compared to many, many years ago. And here, Johannes is demonstrating actually our Oscar module, which is built into the headsets. So he's producing different artifacts, and on top in the video, you can actually see the raw data. And on the bottom, you can see the output of the headset if we are doing the Oscar processing. This includes a very high oversampling, a very steep anti-aliasing filtering, and also adaptive filtering. And you can see how clean the data gets. So I start the video. Johannes produces some artifacts like clenching teeth. So here you can see the muscle contamination. On the bottom, you can see how clean the data comes out of the headset. Then he's bending the head. We get again muscle contamination and some artifacts because of accelerations. And on the bottom, we see it clean again. This makes, of course, a huge difference where you can use BCI technology nowadays. And if you're building a brain-computer interface lab, then you're normally putting a person or a patient into a chair. You're connecting the person to an amplifier. That's the biosignal amplifier. Mostly people are recording between 8 and 256 channels. And then the biosignal amplifier is connected to the recording PC. This is also the real-time processing unit, the brain-computer interface. And then you can display information, for example, on a computer screen. You can use head-mounted displays, or you can also use a huge 3D power wall for highly immersive experiments. And at the same time, you can provide electrical stimulation of the periphery or of the brain. You can do haptic stimulation, audio stimulation, but you can also use trigger buttons, eye trackers, or microphones to record user responses at the same time. And of course, you can also control exoskeletons, robotic devices, or rehabilitation training devices. And this is all speaking with each other in real time. One of the principles that people are using for brain-computer interfaces is going back to Professor Gerd Pfurtscheller. So he was my supervisor during my PhD and also during my master thesis at the University of Technology in Graz. And he came out with the event-related desynchronization, or ERD principle, about 40 years ago. So he figured out if a person imagines or performs a left-hand movement, then the right hemisphere is activated. You can see here the red spot. This is actually the event-related desynchronization located exactly around electrode position C4 of the International 1020 system. And if a person imagines a right-hand movement and the left hemisphere is activated, you can also see here the red spot, the ERD, in this case located over C3. And this is very nice because we know exactly where we should place the EEG electrodes for getting left-hand movement, right-hand movement, also foot movement, for example. This is something that we are using nowadays for a medical product that's called Recoverix. It's a neurorehabilitation system that we use for stroke, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson, and also other illnesses. So in this case, the stroke patient is equipped with the Nautilus system that I already showed you before. We are using 16 electrodes exactly over the sensory motor cortex, because we want to capture EEG data from left-hand movement, right-hand movement, foot movement. So it would be completely useless to put it on the forehead or on the back of the head, because the information is just not located there. Then in front of the patient, you can see a computer screen with a little avatar. The avatar is giving the instruction to the patient, like imagine a right-hand movement or imagine a foot movement. Then when the person is doing it, the brain-computer interface picks it up, and we trigger a functional electrical stimulation of the right hand or of the left foot in real time. So you can see here the electrodes, they're assembled over the muscles. Then the patient makes a dorsiflexion, and the same for the foot movement. Here's a video so that you can understand how the upper extremity treatment, in this case with a stroke patient, is actually done. So in front of him is the computer monitor with the left and the right hand. And now the patient imagines a left hand movement. Brain-computer interface picks up the event-related desynchronization, and we stimulate the hand for about 4 seconds so that the dorsiflexion is performed. The next one is the right hand. This is the paretic hand, which was damaged because of the stroke. You can see the index finger still has spasticity, so the patient cannot fully extend the finger. And this is randomly distributed. The patient has to do 120 left and 120 right hand movement imaginations. This completes one training session. And people are coming back 25 times to do the Recoverix training. So this is about 18 hours of their life, because one session lasts about 45 minutes. And before and afterwards, we are measuring motor functions. So we have many different tests that we are doing, so to figure out how much they are improving. And for the upper extremity, we are using the 9-hole peg test. And here in the video, you will actually see a video before the Recoverix therapy, after 25 training sessions and after 50 training sessions. And this is in a subacute stroke patient. This means the patient had a stroke. He was transferred to the hospital, got the acute treatment. Afterwards, he got the neurorehabilitation. This all lasted about 6 months. And then he was released, and people told him, so the status will be like that for the rest of the life. So here in the top video, you can actually see after half a year after the stroke how his left hand function is. So he can get the little pegs, he can lift it, he can insert it into the little holes, but it's a little bit slow, and he needs also the upper body for moving the hand. On the bottom, you can see it after 50 therapies. You can see how quick he can actually do it. Now he has to remove the little pegs, goes really quick. And if I look at the video, I would tell you this is a healthy person. So I wouldn't be able to tell you anymore that he had a stroke. You can also see he needed 39 seconds for doing the test. So a healthy person of his age needs about 30 seconds normally. So I need the 9-hole peg test to figure actually out that he still has a little handicap. But if I just see the video, it looks normal. In the middle, you can see it after 25 therapies. So this is about 18 hours of training. Slower. Still using the upper body for the movement a little bit. And here he needed 75 seconds. And if we go now back to the top video, so this is 36 training sessions earlier. And you can clearly see how much better the movement or how much worse the movement was beforehand. You can also see the spasticity, which gives him a lot of problems. And this is exactly what we want to have to produce healthy hand movements again with the therapy. Then we did also a clinical study about gait. So we wanted to improve lower limb function because many of these patients who had a stroke have also problems to walk correctly. The same is the case for multiple sclerosis and Parkinson patients. So I show you here an example of a chronic stroke patient who came into the recovery treatment a couple of years after she had the stroke. And then on the left, you can see the video before the treatment. On the right, you can see the video after the treatment. So I play it. So you can see she's able to stand up much quicker. She makes the circle much better. Walking speed is higher. Now watch carefully when she sits down. Looks almost like a healthy person. On the left, takes, for example, much longer. So I can replay it because it goes so quick. So she stands up much better. Walking looks much nicer. The right hand is also less spastic, less tremor. And when she's now sitting on the right, she looks actually like a healthy person. If you look on the left, she still looks like a patient. And actually the best thing is that she forgot her walking stick because she just became so confident that she didn't need it anymore. This is, of course, exactly what we want to achieve with the therapy. So Recoverix is at the moment used in more than 30 countries around the world. And we have done more than 30,000 treatments here in our own recovery center in Schiedlberg in Austria, where I'm located. What can you do to get more resolution? And for that reason, I'm showing you a slide from Kai Miller, who is at the moment at Mayo Clinic. He's a neurosurgeon. And he implanted ECOG grits directly on the cortex. So he has to remove the scalp, the dura mater, and then he can put the grits directly on the cortex. And here you can see these white and black circles. So each one is one ECOG electrode. In this case, he has 2 grits with 32 and 32 channels. This means 64 wires are actually coming out of the scalp of the epilepsy patient in this case. Then he was asking the patient to be at rest. He calculated the power spectrum, and here you can see in blue the characteristic damping of the EEG. This means with higher frequencies, the energy or the power gets less and less. And then the person, while Kai was asking the person to do a hand movement, the power spectrum is here in red. Of course, it's interesting to compare resting with hand movement. So here in the low frequency band, between alpha and beta regions, you can actually see that during resting we have more energy than doing hand movement. This is exactly the event-related desynchronization that we use in recoverix. And you can also see there's a pretty wide cortical network indicated here in blue involved in the low frequency band. But if we are going to higher frequencies, HFB between 80 and 100 Hertz in this case, then we have exactly the opposite. So doing resting, we have less energy than doing hand movement. This is called task-related high gamma activation. You can also see that more or less one single electrode is coding this information. This means the spatial resolution of ECOG recordings are just much higher. And then Kai put a data clef on the patient, and he was asking the patient to move 5 times the thumb, then to be at rest and to move 4 times again. And then he just took the dark blue electrode, overlaying the thumb position, and he reconstructed the movement pattern indicated here in purple. So you can see somehow the number of repetitions. There are no false positives, and here's, for example, a huge overshot when the person is moving the first time the finger. And then with every single repetition, it gets smaller and smaller because the cortex gets used to it and the spinal cord takes over. But also very interesting is that we can do the same for the index finger. So a person was moving here 7 times the index finger, and in purple we can see the reconstructed signal again. First movement has again the large overshot, and then it's stable, no false positives, and then another huge overshot. This means you have to do different tasks after each other to get cortical activation. If you would always do the same, like finger tapping, you wouldn't need your brain anymore. Your spinal cord is doing it. So I can just give the speech to you and my hand would still move. So I don't need my brain for doing that. This is the reason why in recoverix, for example, we are changing between left and right hand movement. And the same is the case for the little finger. This case reconstructed from the light blue electrode, which is about 1 centimeter beside the other electrodes that we are using for these experiments. And here you can very nicely see the number of repetitions in the high gamma signal, no false positives, and again. This is something that's very nicely done with ECOG recordings because the spatial resolution is so high that you can even see single finger movements. And this has very useful applications, for example, in our Cortex system. This is, again, a medical product, has, for example, medical certification in whole Europe, also in the US, also in Australia, and many other countries. And this is used for tumor and epilepsy patients because the neurosurgeon wants to figure out where the most important centers of the brain are located, the so-called eloquent cortex. And for that, the neurosurgeon is implanting ECOG grids. So here you can see the first, the second, the third, the fourth grid that the neurosurgeon Dr. Kamada implanted. On the left, you can see the ECOG recording. And in the front of the patient, we have a computer screen giving instructions to him, like relax. Then the person is just sitting there, and we get baseline high gamma activation. Then he is sticking in and out the tongue. You can see it in the video. And first of all, we get an activation of the temporal base, so the bottom of the brain, because this is the phase-sensitive region. And a few moments later, we get actually the tongue region of the sensory motor cortex here on this grid. Then he's relaxing again. This takes about 10 seconds so that we get additional high gamma baseline activation.
We hear a noise from somewhere.
Then he's listening to the Japanese story, and this activates, first of all, the temporal base because there was the shape of the loudspeaker. And then we find the auditory cortex and Wernicke's area here on the temporal lobe because he was able to understand it. Now he's solving Rubik's Cube. So he needs, of course, the fingers. But first of all, we get an activation of the color sensitive region here on the temporal base. And afterwards, we find the finger region. You have seen this takes about 2 to 3 minutes. And then the neurosurgeon has an idea where, for example, the fingers are located. So this map goes to the operating room. And then the neurosurgeon knows when he removes the brain tissue below the bubble here, then this has the consequence that the patient cannot move the fingers anymore. And this is, of course, something that Dr. Kamada wants to avoid. But we can also use this technology for brain-computer interface experiments. And in this case, Dr. Kamada and Dr. Ogawa from Ashikaga Medical University in Japan implanted a high-resolution ECOG grid on the left and right temporal base. So high-resolution grid means the electrodes are closer together and the diameter is smaller than the clinical standard, which is 1 centimeter center to center distance. And then Dr. Kamada is going to show him different images. And with the brain-computer interface, we are just decoding what the patient is actually seeing. So I start the video. So this is a face, like indicated in the monitor, a symbol, a face, another Japanese symbol, face. You can see this works in real time, even faster than the person is realizing what he's seeing. This is now very interesting. The patient sees himself, it's a face. Now he sees Christoph Capella, it's a face. Now he looks at Dr. Ogawa, and that's the same story like before. He is already used to Dr. Ogawa's face. That's the reason why Dr. Ogawa has to prompt him again to produce high gamma activation. And very interesting is also that we calibrated the brain-computer interface on artificial data on the computer screen, but you can see it works also in real time. So while the patient was seeing real faces, it still worked. This is, of course, very nice for running experiments. And then we investigated how or what we could actually do with non-invasive technology to get a similar resolution like with ECOG signals. And then we looked at the pangolin that you can see here on the image. So this guy has a lot of different scales, and we wanted to overlay the human scalp or head with a lot of these scales for getting additional EEG signals. If you look at the diagram, then we can see on top the skin of the scalp, and on the bottom here, you see the cortex. And the distance from the cortex to the skin is about 15 to 25 millimeters. So this means that the cortex is actually pretty far away from the surface of our head. And this is a standard EEG system with 128 or 256 channels. You can see here active electrodes. So there's a pre-amplifier in every single electrode for high data quality. And the distance between the electrodes is about 2.5 centimeters. In some places, maybe 2 centimeters. And then we are also 15 to 25 millimeters away from the cortex. So the spatial resolution is somehow limited. And of course, you cannot bring these electrodes much closer together because then you get shortcuts between the electrodes because we are injecting electrode gel to have a low impedance between the head and the electrode material. And then it is a fluid, and then we would just shortcut electrodes. So there must be a distance between them. That's the reason why we developed the pangolin system. This is our 1024 ultra high density EEG system. And you can see it consists of a polygon, and each polygon has 16 contacts. They are made of gold. The center to center distance is about 8 millimeters. And the diameter is also very small. And then we have a washer that we can fill with electrode paste. We put it onto the electrode material and then we can stick it on. So it has a very nice glue inside. And this is the head stage amplifier. So the amplifier must be as close as possible to the electrode, and we can just connect it to the pangolin electrode. So first of all, we have to shave the person. Then we are using some alcohol to clean the skin. Then we fill the washer with the electrode paste, remove the paper sticker on top, we glue it on, and we stick on the pre-amplifier. And here's a comparison with this clinical standard. So the clinical standard electrodes are shown here in dark gray. So this is the 19-channel electrode system that most of the hospitals are using. And the distance from one electrode to the next one is about 5 centimeters. So the spatial resolution that you get is about 5 centimeters. If you're working with the extended 1010 system, then we get 64 electrodes, and then you can see the light gray electrodes just in between. So the dark gray and the light gray electrodes sum up to 64 channels. This is used for many research applications, but not so often in hospitals. And for the Pangolin system, we actually get 1024 channels. The right-hand side, you can see it assembled to a human being. This is Maggie. And we assembled 64 polygons, the Pangolin grids, which gives us 1024 channels. And every little circle here in the diagram is actually one Pangolin electrode with a center-to-center distance of about 8 millimeters. So you can see we have much more electrodes with the Pangolin system. And then together with a university in South Korea, we did a finger tapping experiment. So people had to move single fingers a couple of times, and we recorded the EEG signal while they were doing the task. Here's the interesting outcome. So if people move the thumb, indicated here in red, then you can see these 3 electrodes are coding the information. If they move the pinky finger, the little finger, we get the blue electrodes activated. Green would be the ring finger, yellow would be the index finger, and the last, yellow is the middle finger, and orange is actually the index finger. You can see we have a very nice spatial distribution between single fingers. And beforehand, this was completely impossible with EEG data, but with the Pangolin system, we get this high spatial resolution. So beforehand, implants were needed for doing this experiment. And if we look at this slide, then you can actually see how blind you would be when you're just using the 1020 system that hospitals are using. So here's one electrode, here's the next one, next. Then you would never get single finger resolution with this EEG system. And another important fact is actually one standard electrode has a very wide or high diameter. And then we are also injecting the electrode shell. So this means the diameter of the area where we are measuring is even higher. And we could roughly say that 9 Pangolin electrodes are under one clinical standard electrode. And this also explains the high spatial resolution that we are getting, and also that we can distinguish single fingers from each other with the Pangolin system. This resolution is so good that I'm actually recommending to PhD students to select 3 papers that you like, then replicate it with the Pangolin system. Whatever you find is with higher spatial resolution, and you can get a nice publication in a high-ranking journal, and this completes your PhD. But there's also another principle that people are using for brain-computer interfacing. You can do with the P300 evoke potential, for example, very nice communication applications or also brain assessments. But first I'm explaining you visual evoke potentials. So if a person is looking at the LED flickering, for example, in reality or on the computer screen, then your brain shows a standard visual evoke potential that's indicated here. So there's a wave called P100 because it's positive going up, and it's 100 milliseconds after the stimulus occurs on the screen. Another wave is, for example, called N135 because it's negative, and it's 135 milliseconds after the stimulus. And if we are adding now some cognitive relevance to the task, like please count as quick as possible how many times the P is flashing here in the alphabet, then your brain is busy, and as soon as the P occurs, now your brain experiences a P300 response indicated here, and it's just overlaid to the standard visual evoke potential. So it's about 300 milliseconds later, and it's positive. And if it's bigger, if the task is more difficult for you. So actually, our task as brain-computer interface designers is to make the task as difficult as possible to generate a big P300 response. And the simple way of doing this is to highlight single characters after each other. And when you're focusing, for example, on the W, Then after the time point where the W was presenting on the screen, indicated here with a red line, we find in green the P300 response. You can see it has a amplitude of about 7 microvolts in this case. The latency is 220 milliseconds. So it's roughly around 300 milliseconds. And the response for all the other characters, A, B, C, is indicated here in orange. It's smaller. And you can see also the repetition rate of the flickers in the signal. So the brain-computer interface has to find the difference between the orange and the green line to use it as a spelling tool. There's a very easy trick to make it faster, so you can just highlight the whole row and column at the same time. Looks like that. And then you can actually communicate 6 times faster. There's also a pretty old video showing actually how a P300 speller works. So this video is about 15 years old. Just showing you also something from the history. So we assembled 8 electrodes over the most important regions for getting the P300 response. We used MATLAB and Simulink for running the experimental paradigm, for calibrating the brain-computer interface. The calibration is important, so you have to select, for example, 5 characters, in this case shoes. Doing the calibration, a person has to look first at the S, and he or she should count how many times it's flashing up as quick as possible. We can also do it 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And every time your brain is responding with the P300 response, it takes about 45 seconds. Then we get 30 averages of the P300 response. This is the calibration signal that we need. And after this is finished, we go to the next character, which is the H. The person is counting again. So it doesn't matter in which language you are counting, we just need your attention. It's important that you are focusing on the task. You should not speak, you should not have a chewing gum, because we really want to have clean EEG data. And then we can already increase the speed of the brain-computer interface communication tool. So now I'm spelling GTAC. First one is already done. Here's the T. 1, 2, decision made. This is 800 milliseconds per character. And here's the C. 1, 2, decision made. And this is somehow the maximum speed you can achieve by typing with the brain-computer interface, but it's comparable to typing with 2 fingers. Of course, you can also use some word prediction like on the cell phone, and then it's much faster. And a very nice property of the P300 spell is that you can just swap out the characters, for example, with Japanese symbols, and then you can also speak in Japanese language, like shown here by Kenji Kansaku in Japan. And another very nice trick is to overlay the black and white characters with famous faces. So here, for example, you can see Russell Crowe. And when your brain sees a face, then it immediately tries to figure out who this person is. This makes the P300 response even bigger. And in that diagram, you can actually see that all the people in the experiment achieved 100% accuracy with the face speller setup. So if somebody is doing nowadays a P300 speller, he has to reach 100% accuracy, otherwise he is actually making a mistake, or he is just using something which is not appropriate. So the biggest P300 response is actually produced if your mother is shouting your name, but it's just difficult for us to have. And here you can see a video that Bernard, one of our computer scientists, recorded. And you can see how the Unicorn Hybrid Black is nowadays interfacing with Unity. So in this case, we are using 8 electrodes over the most important regions for recording a P300 response or code-based visual evoked potentials. You can see at the beginning, he has here green lights. So they indicate that all the EEG electrodes are good. So EEG data quality is always essential for achieving high classification accuracy. Then he is doing the calibration. This takes about 25 seconds. So he's just looking in the middle of the screen. And then we have a task. So he has 30 items on the screen. and he's just looking from one item to the next one. There's a little red point on the left-hand side indicating when the brain-computer interface actually selected it. So now he looks here, selected. Now he looks here, selected. Now he looks here, selected. He looks here, selected. So you got it. It takes about 2 to 3 seconds for making a selection out of 30 choices. You can see he doesn't make false positives. If he is looking away, there's no selection ongoing. And if I move to the end of the video, then we are now here. You can actually see that he is just doing one after the other without any mistakes and pretty quick. So for that, we just need a few seconds of calibration, and then he can already control things in Unity. Nicely done. This P300 response is also something that we can, of course, use for other applications. In this case, it's our Blondie check. That's a politically incorrect name for an image ranking tool. So in this case, we are just showing different images, and the person has to look at it. And afterwards, the brain-computer interface makes a selection or a ranking of the most important images for your brain. We start it up. So you can see the person just looks quickly, and the blonde girl here is on first position ranking before other human beings. Then we get some landscapes, and the lake, for example, is the least important image for the person. And this is, of course, a funny application that I showed you here, but you can also use it for other neuromarketing tasks, and you could visualize, for example, different logos to figure out which logo actually works best for this human participant. And here's another example where we're using the brain-computer interface in augmented reality. In this case, we are performing the calibration with 4 items for moving something forward, backward, left, and right. The GTEC logo indicates actually where the person should look for a couple of seconds. And when the calibration is done, then you can see here the EEG system under a head-mounted display. And in augmented reality, he can look at different markers and he can switch on the light bulbs. That's, of course, also a very important application because more and more tools are developed for AR, but you can also just play a computer game. In this case, we have a little ball in red here, which is guided with the brain-computer interface control. So now he is moving left. Now he has to move upwards. And you can just see the controls are attached to the maze in the game. And Bernard can very nicely move the ball without any mistakes through the maze. So this is all a Unity toolbox, and you can just drag and drop these controllable elements into the game. All the brain-computer interface signal processing, data acquisition is handled, and then you get commands that you can use in the game, and here he reaches the target. Of course, you can also attach the controls directly to the ball or the avatar, so they are moving together with the avatar, and then it's easier to move the item and to keep your focus on the avatar that you actually want to control. So you can also see here this works very nicely without any mistakes. And here's another computer game where we actually used it, again with the Unicorn Hybrid Black. So in this case, I am using my arms and fingers to control the keyboard. I can delegate the avatar into different directions. And then we have boxes in the environment. With the brain-computer interface, you can actually destroy the boxes. So you could see it exploded, and this frees the way for me to collect the coin. And when I collect the coin, then the bridge behind me is actually closing, and it allows me to continue in the game. Then you have to avoid some of the enemies. So this blue guy is dangerous. Of course, you have to stay on the pathway. But now I have to destroy this guy to collect the coin. So here we have again 8 electrodes. It explodes, and I can collect it. And this closes another bridge just behind me. So this one, there's another enemy that we have to avoid. So I can continue. And in this case, the brain-computer interface control actually becomes very useful because you have to master both the keyboard control or joystick control, which is anyhow made for high-speed computer gaming. But you also have to be a master of the brain-computer interface control to complete the game. So without destroying the boxes, you're not able to collect the coins, the bridges wouldn't close, and you cannot complete the game. And suddenly the brain-computer interface becomes a lot of fun for the game playing. But beside these gaming applications, we can also use it for brain assessment. For example, of patients with disorders of consciousness. So if I look at the diagram, then I have here normal people, and they have normal motor responses and normal cognitive functions. But on the other hand side, we have people in coma, so they don't move and they don't have cognitive functions anymore. This means the EEG looks pretty flat and you cannot really extract information. But some patients are a little bit better in the vegetative state or minimal consciousness state. So normally they don't move, but they might have some cognitive functions. You want to have a tool to figure out which one they have. The same is the case for locked-in patients or completely locked-in patients. So very often they don't move, but they might have cognitive functions. And for that, we developed a mind beagle system. The beagle is the little dog that you might know from Australia on the airport. They have a very good nose. And in our case, it's sniffing in the cortex if there are any functions left. And we have different tasks, for example, an auditory P300 experiment. For that, we put in-ear phones into the ears of the patient. And then we play high and low tones like da 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 dee, da 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 dee. And we instruct the patient, please count only the high tones. And if the patient is doing it correctly, then we get the green P300 response here. And for the low tones, we get the blue evoke potential. So you can see here there's a nice difference between green and blue. Whatever is green shaded is statistically significant. And if I would see the evoke potential here, then I would know this patient or this person is able to understand the task. But very often these evoke potentials are pretty ugly and nobody knows how to interpret it. And this is the reason why we need brain-computer interface technology for that. So on the bottom, you can see the BCI accuracy over 30 high tones that we are applying. This patient needed only to hear 4 high tones to reach 100% classification accuracy. This means the EEG data between low tones and high tones can be perfectly discriminated, so there's information in the data. On the contrary, if the accuracy is 0%, this would mean there's no information in the EEG data. The patient was not able to do it successfully. And if this was proven successfully, we can go one step ahead and we can actually ask questions to the patient. And the patient can answer with yes and no with the brain-computer interface. We can ask, for example, do you like City College? And then the system is collecting EEG data, analyzing the EEG data, and the little circle would move to the yes, and this confirms the answer. But of course, you should ask something where you know the answer so that you get the objective proof if one of these patients has command following and if the patient is actually understanding everything what you're saying. This is demonstrated here by Nancy. So she's actually speaking in Italian language and she is asking, am I speaking in Italian? So the expected answer from Mind Beagle is actually yes. So let's have a look.
Valentina, parlo io in italiano. Per sì conti a sinistra, per no conti a destra. Ok?
So she was asking, am I speaking in Italian? Of course, it was Italian language, and now the system is collecting EEG data for about 30 seconds. There's a statistical analysis in the background, and only if Mind Beagle is sure that the answer is correct, the little circle will move to yes or no. This is actually the magic moment with the patient because sometimes they were lying there for months or years, and you just don't know if they're understanding you.
Brava, perfetto, Valentina.
So this confirms that she was understanding the question, but of course this could be a random choice just by mistake. So it also
Io in inglese.
So it makes sense to ask exactly the opposite. Am I speaking in English? She is again speaking in Italian language, so the expected answer is no. Let's have a look.
Io in inglese. Per sì, conti a sinistra, per no, conti a destra.
So now she was again asking in Italian language. It was, of course, the expected answer no. And this is actually done with vibro-tactile stimulation. So we have one little vibrator on the left and one little vibrator on the right. And the person can count the vibrations on the left hand to say yes, and they count the vibrations on the right hand to say no. It takes again about 30 seconds. Magic moment is again, if the little circle moves, to yes and no. And of course, now it should go to no to confirm the question.
Brava, perfetto, Valentina, perfetto.
And this is just a very objective proof to figure out if these patients understand you. And if this is positively done, then of course family members and physicians are much more motivated to do something for patients. And sometimes you figure out a couple of years after they had, for example, an accident. So very nice and useful application of a P300 speller. And the last video that I'm showing you is going back to invasive technology. So here we are decoding, for example, hand movements. So the patient, the epilepsy patient, has a peace sign, straight fingers, or a fist. You can see all the ECOG channels are connected to the brain-computer interface. And we can actually figure out in real time where these electrodes are located. So this is a typical experimental setup in a hospital. And then Dr. Kamada planted a high-resolution grid over the sensory motor cortex. So with electrodes very close together. And he was asking the person here to do different hand poses. So like fingers straight, and we control the robotic hand here on the keyboard with the brain-computer interface. You can see the hand reacts very nicely. We don't have false positives. That's a peace sign. The hand makes the peace sign. Finger straight, a fist. The hand makes the fist. Actually, the brain-computer interface can decode faster than the robotic hand is actually reacting. And there's one very interesting sequence at second 28 where she is going to make a mistake. You have to watch very careful. So the next one is a mistake. So the instruction is peace. She makes a fist. Also the robotic hand makes a fist. And this is actually perfect embodiment that we want to achieve for controlling an avatar with the brain-computer interface. And with this video, I would actually end my presentation, and I would like to ask you if there are any questions. Manos, do we have any?
Thank you very much, Christopher. I don't know why it is broken anyway. So yes, there is one question from the audience from Miss Cordin. She says, "Thank you very much. Amazing advances of technology made to help people and improve lives." She would like to ask if having these devices been tested in children, and are there any contradictions?
Of course, they're heavily used with children. So Recoverix, the neuro rehabilitation device, is very often used with children. Even in our own center here in Austria, we have children coming in. The youngest one was 5 years old, but there's not really a limitation. So people have to understand, of course, the task they should do. And they must be able to sit for like 45 minutes to do the neuro rehabilitation. This is sometimes problematic with children because they just want to sit for 45 minutes. And then we just make the session shorter, maybe 20 minutes. And then with the training, it gets longer and longer. You just need a smaller EEG cap to fit it on them. For the cortic U system, this is the high gamma mapping system. It's actually very useful with children because sometimes they are very young if they have epilepsy or a brain tumor. Then you have to do the brain mapping as quick as possible. And of course, children are not always doing what you are telling them to do, in contrast to adults. So this means with the Cortex-Q system, you can also work nicely with children. You are brushing, for example, with a toothbrush the finger, and then you get the sensory region in the brain, or you are just giving via the loudspeaker an English text that we are reading, and you get Wernicke's area and auditory cortex. So the patient is not required to do something, and you can still do the mapping. And of course, this is very important. And of course, if you look at DOC patients, people or children who had an accident, then of course you can also work with the Mind Beagle system to figure out if they have command following. This is of course also very useful.
Thank you very much, Christoph, and thank you very much, Ms. Cordy, for your question. Since you are talking about imaging, I'm very curious that I want to ask about pangolin. You know, it's a big breakthrough in EEG, let's say, community, having so many electrodes on the scalp. And I would like to ask you, Christoph, if you have studied using pangolin, the localization problems that we have with EEG, with common EEG. And what is, can you somehow, let's say, parallelize the pangolins, the high, ultra high density EEG with comparing with the power of imaging localization or localizing sources?
Definitely, we have also scientific papers where this is actually shown, so we can do this dipole reconstruction very nicely for the inverse problem. The big advantage is that you get much more spatial information. Then there are two other very important things. So first of all, the spacing between our electrodes is precise. So it's exactly 8.6 millimeters. For other EEG electrodes, you are never so sure about the EEG electrode spacing. So you can use a Polemus or other navigation systems to measure where the sensors are located, but it's never very accurate. So it's around 2 centimeters, but it could also be 1.5. This makes, of course, the source localization inaccurate. But much more important is for standard source localization problems, people are using standard EEG electrodes, and they have a very wide diameter. So with all the electrode gel, this like 2 centimeters that where you are measuring. And this means the area is really big. With the pangolin system, it's a few millimeters, and it's exactly a few millimeters. And this makes the EEG electrode much smaller. And of course, the area from where you are recording much more precise. And for that reason, the reconstructed result is much more stable. And there's a lot of literature of how many EEG channels you should actually use for the inversive problem, and people agreed more or less to 64. So they were saying beyond 64 EEG channels, there's not really more information in the EEG, which is correct, but it's mostly explained by the large diameter. And with the pangolin system, it's just much smaller, so much more precise.
Okay, thank you very much, Christoph. It was a pleasure to having you with us today. So let's continue with the next, let's say, presentation from Dr. Aristea Ladas, who is going to speak about aperiodic brain activity, the secrets of the minds. Dr. Ladas is actually a colleague from City College, the University of York Europe campus. She's assistant professor in psychology, and we are very glad to have her here today to talk us about this aperiodic brain activity. So Aristea, please.
Hi everyone, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. Okay. So my presentation is much more theoretical than the previous wonderful one. Nevertheless, it all begins from theory, doesn't it? So relatively recently, my team and I were interested very much in the brain's aperiodic component. And this is the first paper that we have published, an opinion paper regarding the prominent theories of consciousness and why would analyzing the brain's aperiodic activity be useful in adding into the open questions of the most prevailing theories of consciousness, also using philosophy to disentangle that whole mystery of consciousness. Now, from that work, I'm going to show you our arguments today about why we should analyze the brain's aperiodic component in order to reveal some probably hidden secrets of the mind. Now, although probably most of you are quite knowledgeable about—
Aristea, excuse me, do you change slides that moment?
Yes, I did.
Because we see, yeah, okay, no, we see there is a problem.
Okay.
Probably. We see only your first slide and actually not in a slide, let's say, in the presentation form.
So should I unshare and share again?
Yes, please, if it's possible.
Yeah. Okay.
It's better to share all your screen.
Okay.
And then make the slide show full screen or something like that.
Okay. Does this work?
Yes, of course. Now it's working.
Good again?
Thank you.
Great, great. So that's the paper I was telling you about, an opinion paper. So although many of you will be quite knowledgeable about the brain's activity, I thought that there might be also some people who are not that knowledgeable in our audience today. So keep up with me, please. Now, what is brain activity? Brain activity is composed of neuronal oscillations, aka periodic activity, versus aperiodic activity. They are the signals that are transmitted when functional connectivity occurs, and these are distinguished in two types of electrophysiological activity detected through the EEG: periodic and aperiodic activity. Now, traditionally, the focus has been on oscillations or periodic activity, which separate the brain signals into different waves depending on their frequency, or different brain frequencies as they're called. The gamma frequency, which is the fastest one, delta frequency, alpha, theta, and beta, delta, alpha, and theta. So periodic activity consists of all these fruitful waves of signals, and these represent the information that is passed from one neural hub to another, that is, from a group of neurons to another group of neurons. This is what is represented by the EEG. Now, aperiodic activity is traditionally considered as rather a noise between those waves. So by looking to analyze the brain's periodic component, we exclude the aperiodic one. Now, aperiodic activity is believed to reflect background neural noise along with other information like the balance between the excitation and inhibition of neurons. It is defined as non-oscillatory 1/f-like neural signal, which is the brain's asynchronous or aperiodic activity, as it's called. Now, the 1/f-like slope, in essence, represents that power decreases with frequency. The higher the frequency, the lower the power. The key features of aperiodic activity is that, first of all, it's not tied to specific frequencies, unlike alpha and beta waves, and that it is linked to synaptic noise, ion channel activity, and network states all together, as opposed to periodic activity. Now, here is a graphical representation of the 1/f-like slope of the aperiodic component. You can see in the left figure, it is the green line. So we have the aperiodic offset, which is below the actual brain wave that we are measuring. You can see here an alpha wave that peaks here, whereas the aperiodic component lies beneath that. Similarly, in the figure on the right, you can see the brain oscillations, which are usually these are the ones that are usually analyzed in EEG studies, whereas below that we have the 1/f power slope, which is considered the aperiodic component. Now, researchers have been applying filters and elegant methodological protocols in order to isolate aperiodic activity from the recorded EEG signal, because as aforementioned, it is considered a simple noise that carries no useful information. However, due to technological advances, we now know that aperiodic activity is not just noise, but consists of very informative different frequencies used by the brain to functionally communicate, which echo simultaneously, and that's the reason why we can record them. Such temporal dynamics are seen in several natural phenomena, quite interestingly, such as traffic, earthquakes, biological networks, forest fires, because generally the nature behaves in a non-linear manner, as we all know. Such dynamics are believed to carry very useful information, regardless of the underlying power law principles, although the fact that periodic and aperiodic activity overlap makes it quite difficult to distinguish one from the other. Nevertheless, there are some suggestions of wonderful tools nowadays, for example, from the lab of Wojtek, that help us to disentangle the aperiodic from the periodic component. Now, the narrowband oscillations that are responsible for this synergy of different brain areas are limited into transmitting long-range signals, and that's a fact. Therefore, by analyzing the brain's periodic activity, we cannot be very precise in analyzing long-distance networks. However, distant neuronal hubs, which fire at the same time, could dynamically produce aperiodic activity. And therefore, this suggests that we can use the analysis of aperiodic activity to assess distant network cooperation with, and by being more punctual at it. Such distant network cooperation is reflected by the brain's states such as consciousness, or by the large brain networks of creativity and of intelligence, where you have distant neuronal hubs cooperating with each other, and therefore making it difficult for the periodic component to characterize them, as opposed to aperiodic activity. Now, there are additional reasons that analyzing aperiodic activity could prove very useful. For example, structural connectivity, we know that it shapes in part functional connectivity. Therefore, structural differences could also induce changes in the aperiodic components of one's functional connectivity. And we believe that this could explain the subjective experience of consciousness. We know that no one shares exactly the same functional structural connectivity, and therefore we would expect that these very slight differences in structural connectivity could be reflected in the brain's functional connectivity shown by aperiodic activity, and it is due to these very slight structural differences that we can see the subjective qualities of consciousness, which are actually unique to each person. Now, continuing with this argument, the aperiodic activity structural advantage in terms of connectivity, is that it is a widespread aperiodic perturbations, which are now termed neuronal avalanches, have been recently suggested to convey individualized information that is highly specific to the person who is experiencing these neuronal avalanches. Therefore, the term brain fingerprint has been given to these aperiodic components. It is this reason that we believe the inherent subjectivity and uniqueness of the neuronal avalanches makes us believe that the subjectivity that is also inherent in the qualia of consciousness is reflected from the brain's aperiodic component. Also, variations in aperiodic activity are shown with different attentional states and different stimulus properties. That is, aperiodic activity dynamically interacts with both the brain's attentional states and the stimulus that it perceives. Now, it is a fact that during different consciousness states, the state of attention also differs, either being externally directed or internally directed, like, for example, when we're daydreaming or when we are dreaming in the REM phase. In a similar manner, the perceived stimulus properties when a stimulus is perceived from the environment, or better yet, the quality of those stimuli also differs between dreaming and wakefulness. Now, given that aperiodic activity reflects both variance in both attentional states, either internal or external, and stimulus properties and qualities, then we would expect that aperiodic activity will also pinpoint these differences when analyzed for wakefulness versus dreaming, and therefore function as a proxy of differential states of consciousness, if we generalize it to other states of consciousness as well, such as under anesthesia, for example, or in neurodiverse individuals. There have been a limited number of previous studies on aperiodic activity in different consciousness states with very encouraging results. For example, aperiodic activity seems to effectively differentiate between resting state wakefulness, the non-REM sleep stages, and anesthesia. Another study has shown that aperiodic or brain spontaneous activity, otherwise termed neuronal avalanches, reflects the context of ignition that is suggested by one of the most prominent theories of consciousness, the global network workspace hypothesis, which suggests that it is that ignition from the sharing of energy between the neural networks that brings about that momentary sense of subjective consciousness, of subjective awareness, which is termed in the neurosciences as a wake consciousness. Now, that concept of ignition could be reflected by aperiodic activity, as it was shown by the study of Rabouf and colleagues. So in essence, they suggest that aperiodic activity signals the access of information in the global workspace. They then proceed in arguing that a combination of both oscillations and avalanches would be satisfactory for a complete account of consciousness and its neural subtraits. Regarding the other most prominent theory, neuroscientific theory of consciousness, the information integration theory, there has been an argument there as well from the theory's developers that aperiodic activity could reflect the information integration described by this theory. So one theory, the global network hypothesis, suggests a concept of ignition that turns on, let's think about it like that, the information in the global network space of the brain, and therefore provides that subjective awareness of consciousness. And the information integration theory does not include the concept of ignition, but instead it has that concept of information integration. And as soon as that integration happens, then you have the subjective sense of consciousness. Now, both integration from the IIT theory and ignition from the GNWH theory could be represented by the brain's aperiodic activity. Other studies have shown that maybe it is that maybe consciousness does not emerge with sudden onsets, as it is suggested from both the global workspace hypothesis and the information integration theory, but it could be there all along. Now, what is of interest here, it is that it is the brain's aperiodic activity as opposed to oscillatory activity that is always ongoing in the brain. That's an additional reason why we believe that by analyzing aperiodic activity, we could reveal some useful information about the open questions of consciousness, which regard actually the qualia, the subjective qualities of consciousness that remain unanswered. aperiodic brain activity has been shown to function as a biomarker in different diseases. For example, in schizophrenia, rather recently, it has been shown that there is a flattened slope in people with schizophrenia as opposed to people without schizophrenia. In Alzheimer's disease, it seems that the brain's aperiodic component shows a steeper slope as opposed to controls. In epilepsy studies, it has been shown that there are altered aperiodic dynamics before the seizure, which could function as a determinant of a seizure coming, and therefore probably being able to help the patient before the onset of the seizure. Now, all these studies suggest that the brain's aperiodic activity could function very well as a biomarker for neuromodulation therapies, but even for distinguishing patients in the initial stages of a disease as opposed to controls. There are many future open questions that remain to be answered, such as, for example, how does aperiodic activity interact with oscillations? Can aperiodic activity reveal any information for consciousness qualia? Can we modulate the brain's aperiodic activity for therapeutic benefits? The new methods that have emerged, thankfully, provide us with the opportunity to have a detailed recording and analysis of the brain's aperiodic activity. Some suggestions are to combine signal from the fMRI and the EEG, or to combine signal from MEG and the EEG to have a more thorough view of the aperiodic component. These, in combination to machine learning approaches, could actually provide us with rich information about the brain's aperiodic component. Thankfully, we have some time now to watch the video, a very short video explaining what is aperiodic activity. Let me find that. Okay.
My work is easy because
Can you see that?
I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track.
We can see, but we can see an advertisement.
Yes, I know.
Picture the activity in your brain like the water in rivers and streams, with electrical impulses flowing in many directions. In the narrow streams, the flow is laminar, while the rivers are wide and have turbulent flow. In fluid dynamics, laminar flow describes a regular and predictable motion, whereas turbulent flow is irregular and chaotic. Similarly, when using electroencephalography to record brain activity, we see regular and irregular components. Periodic activity is orderly and predictable like laminar flow. Also called neural oscillations, the activity generated by groups of neurons firing at specific frequencies is categorized into frequency bands. These are associated with specific brain states and functions. Aperiodic activity, on the other hand, is chaotic and unpredictable like turbulent flow. However, it has certain properties which gives it the additional names 1/f slope and scale-free activity. 1/f explains the inverse relation between frequency and power, because low frequencies have more power and high frequencies have less power, and scale-free activity describes how these statistical features remain consistent across different scales like time. Returning to our comparison, laminar flow can only occur under certain conditions like narrow space, low speed, and high viscosity. Therefore, most fluid flow is turbulent. Possibly reflecting this, there are over twice as many publications on turbulent flow than on laminar flow in physics research. So what about in neuroscience? Well, periodic activity and aperiodic activity are like two sides of a coin. They are just different components of brain activity. However, as aperiodic activity is more complex, it might be expected that it is more thoroughly investigated. That said, there are actually 50 to 100 times more publications focused on periodic activity than the aperiodic component. For many decades, this difference was even greater, as aperiodic activity was disregarded as insignificant noise that needed to be filtered to reveal the more useful neural oscillations. That was until scientists like Bradley Wojtek and others began to uncover their importance. Wojtek and his group developed new tools to isolate and analyze these different components of brain activity, leading to new studies revealing the so-called noise is far from meaningless and holds useful information. For example, aperiodic activity can help detect neurological and psychiatric conditions. It can identify Parkinson's disease, dementia, and depression. Across these studies, a steeper aperiodic slope indicating stronger power in slow frequencies and weaker power in faster ones was consistently observed. Some studies even describe aperiodic activity as a brain signature that can identify individuals with high accuracy and helps differentiate subtypes and stages of diseases, making it a valuable tool for personalized medicine. Beyond supporting diagnosis, aperiodic activity can also determine prognosis by predicting how effective treatments will be. In depression, therapies like magnetic seizure therapy and electroconvulsive therapy increase aperiodic activity and correlate with symptom relief. Other research has looked into physiological factors that influence aperiodic brain activity. For instance, bodily rhythms like breathing cause fluctuations in aperiodic activity, and this may have implications for neurological and psychiatric diseases. Additionally, the normal process of aging also leads to aperiodic activity changes. There are rapid changes across infancy, and the brain becomes noisier throughout aging, and these insights may help us understand development in aging. Returning to our comparison with physics, turbulence is more researched because it is prevalent and complex. However, in terms of interest, laminar flow dominates searches online, possibly due to its simplicity and visual appeal. This preference could also apply to neuroscience, where periodic signals have historically received more attention. But just as turbulence and disorder are fundamental and present throughout the universe due to the law of entropy, we should also consider how this applies to the brain. By limiting our focus to neural oscillations, we are looking at the tip of an iceberg while ignoring the rest underwater. In the words of Dr. Albert St. Georgi, research is to see what everybody has seen and to think what nobody has thought. So by beginning more research on aperiodic activity, we open doors to new discoveries and a deeper understanding of the most complex system we know.
So if you have any questions, I would be very happy to answer.
If you have any question, please use Q&A. Aristea, have you finished your presentation?
Yes, I have.
Okay, very nice. I have one question since, let me ask it before to give time to the audience to write in Q&A. If you cannot use Q&A, just go down on the screen and press the button right to the share button, which says Q&A. So there we can receive questions and have the answers. Aristea, what is your opinion about, because I have never studied aperiodic activity, about the methodology used to detect aperiodic activity from the EEG signals? What is the current methodology, and what are the, let's say, according to your understanding, the pitfalls that this methodology may have so as to improve it?
That's not an easy question for me to answer because thankfully we have another neuroscientist in our group who does that. Nevertheless, it is the methodology that is used. It is like we take the methodology used for neural oscillations and try to apply it to analyzing aperiodic activity as well. So therefore, we behave towards aperiodic activity as the same way as we behave towards neural oscillations, which could involve several limitations, of course. Now, for example, for sleep studies, we would analyze it the same way as we analyze the neural oscillations in order to separate the sleep stages. So and nevertheless, this could suggest, however, that we are missing some information in that process. I have not seen a paper yet using quite a different method into analyzing the brain's aperiodic component. And the existing papers on the brain's aperiodic activity and its usefulness do not have some strong suggestions about using different strategies. But I believe that machine learning techniques could prove very, very useful in actually analyzing the aperiodic component instead of the traditional.
Yes, that's what I was thinking, detecting the periodic activity. Yes, right. You know, you said that you are not a neuroscientist, you are the neuroscientist. And, you know, it's sometimes very good, because we are doing science, to be aware that we don't know everything, and we yet have a lot of us in front of us to explore it. And I'm very glad for this. So we have another question. Can we train our brain through oscillations like mentioning Dr. Joe Dispenza on his book?
Well, just like we can train our brain and neurofeedback shows that a lot and proves that a lot, since we can train our neural oscillations, it makes much sense to assume that we, at the same time, we are training our brains a periodic component. However, we have not focused on assessing exactly how we do that. But it is not possible for someone under a neurofeedback intervention, for example, to train only their periodic component. Both of them are trained together, obviously. However, never have we assessed how does the brain's periodic component change from a neurofeedback session. So that would be very interesting to see, indeed. And most definitely, yes, I strongly believe that we can train our periodic component as well.
There is a way I was let's say, searching the literature about training the high frequency oscillations for epileptic purposes mainly. And except of neurofeedback, there is another one way that's called, it's actually it's like TDCA, transcranial direct current stimulation, but this is called TACA, which has to do with the anodal, let's say, not cathodal electricity. Anyway, I'm not so aware also about this methodology, so I don't say too much, but I remember that I found literature that they tried and they used this kind of, let's say, methodology to, let's say, to modulate high frequency oscillations.
That's very interesting because we are, my group and I, we're interested very much in the brain's gamma frequency specifically, which is, you know, the fastest one, and we still cannot know where does it emerge from the brain, which makes it very, very interesting for me, actually. And I do believe that there are some subjective consciousness qualities hidden in there. Maybe that methodology that you're suggesting, Manos, could be very useful for consciousness research in this sense.
Maybe or maybe not.
Yeah, we can't know if we don't try it.
Of course, of course. So, Arista, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Let's continue with Dr. Elena Smekina. Hi, Elena. Nice to see you. How are you?
Hi, I'm very good. Can you hear
Nice.
me well?
Yes, yes, of course, we
Okay,
can hear you very well. So let me present Elena. Elena holds a PhD in theoretical computational neuroscience from the University of Göttingen in Germany. Her doctoral research focused on applying TMS with TMS-EEG method to investigate neurological conditions such as disorders of consciousness, stroke, and depression. She subsequently completed 2 years postdoctoral, let's say, fellowship at the Department of Cognitive Neuroscience, again in Göttingen, exploring heart-brain interactions and how the cardiac signals influence the conscious perception of TMS-induced phosphanes. And currently, she's working as a scientific consultant at Dirix Medical Technology GmbH, where she supports and advises researchers in initiating and advancing their works with, let's say, FNIRS technology. Elena, we are very glad to have you here, and we are very curious to see how FNIRS can be utilized for neurofeedback purposes.
Thank you very much for introduction. I'm also very happy to be here today and show you the fascinating world of FNIRS technology. And let me share my screen. Can you see it now?
Yes, of course we can see, but we see the presenter screen, not the big one.
Yes, sorry, just a second. I will try it again. Okay, that should be the right screen, right?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, and then let me start. So, as Manos mentioned, I'm Elena. Very happy to be here today, and I'm scientific consultant at Neuroscience. And Neuroscience is a scientific company we produce and manufacture FNIRS devices. And we are dedicated to science a lot, and we are happy to always support our customers. And we have offices in Berlin and one in Orlando, and customers, more than 1,500 active labs all over the world. And we are happy always to support them, and this amount of people using our FNIRS devices, of course, results in high publications, so we are one of the most published FNIRS company. And let me explain you briefly about what FNIRS is. And FNIRS stands for Functional Near-Infrared Spectroscopy. Spectroscopy is physical part which studies the interaction of the light with matter. And to understand what is that, you can do also at home a simple experiment by shining the light through your hand. And you can see that some amount of light goes through the tissues, so you can see some bone structures, not very precisely, but still you can see that light goes through it. And what you can already see here also is that we shine the white light, and on another side of the hand, for example, we can see that it turns red. And then what's happening with photons or with the light when we shine it to the head, for example? The thing is that photons get different behavioral. For example, they get scattered, or they change their path because they just bump into different molecules or chromophores. For example, like molecules of water, fat, and all the compartments of biological tissues. But the thing is that most photons, they create some kind of the path distribution profile. And this has this banana shape, and meaning that if we place the detector next to the photon or light illuminator, we are able to detect some photons which go to this path distribution profile. And photons not only scatter, so they don't just easily go through this path, because we have different molecules and different chromophores inside the tissues, and some of them are able to absorb those photons, absorb the light. And when we shine the light at specific frequencies or wavelengths, for example, the one that we use in FNIRS is usually 760, 850 nanometers of the wavelengths. And at those specific wavelengths, we're able to distinguish how much of the photons were absorbed by oxygenated hemoglobin and deoxygenated hemoglobin. And of course, we have not only those molecules, we have also the melanin, fats, water, and in this frequency, in this wavelength spectrum, we can detect the changes in the oxy and deoxy hemoglobin absorption. And of course, the depth depends on how far we place detector and source. And there were, of course, the study about the validation of how much signal and how much depth we can achieve by placing the detectors and sources on a different distance from each other. And the most use in FNIRS distance is usually 3 centimeters between detector and source, which means that we are able to capture the signal changes up to 1.5 centimeter in depth. And that is the limits for FNIRS signal registration. And then which kind of signal we register using FNIRS. So FNIRS is based on the phenomena which is called neurovascular coupling. It is quite similar to fMRI techniques where we know that when we have the increased neural activity. When you perform a simple cognitive task or some motor tasks, for example, you get the area which gets activated, which also goes together with the increased metabolic changes. So we will see the increased amount of oxygen in this area. And this oxygen comes together with hemoglobin, and using FNIRS, we can see the changes in the signal where we have the increased amount of oxygenated hemoglobin and when we have decreased. And basically the outcome of FNIRS neuroimaging technique is usually the changes in oxygenated and deoxygenated hemoglobin, the plot that you can see here, which is called the hemodynamic response. And of course, as that is a neuroimaging method, we can also see by placing the sources and detectors to specific brain location or area, we are able to locate where the signal comes from. And that's how we create those maps of the brain activation. And then, of course, in the perfect world, we would assume that all the signal that we capture comes directly from the brain, but in reality, it's not working so perfectly, because we also have some blood vessels, not only in the gray matter in the cortical tissues, but also in the extracerebral layers, and we also have a lot of systemic changes, like physiological changes. And as I have mentioned, the distance between the source and detector, which is 3 centimeters in a standard FNIRS channel, but it allows us also, this distance allows us to manipulate the depth from which we capture the signal. And when we place the detector very close to the source, for example, 8 millimeters, which is like short distance detector, we are able to capture the signal not from the brain, but mostly from the non-cerebral layers, like skin and skull and all the systematic changes. And additionally, we can also use some peripheral physiology devices, and we can register at the same time everything like heartbeat, PPG, SPO, and different physiological changes, respiration and temperature. And here, for example, using short distance detector is very important in FNIRS because the signal is basically affected a lot by physiology. And here, for example, you can see the example of the hemodynamic response before using short distance channels and after. And here we can see that the hemodynamic response is much cleaner when we use short channel and all the physiological activity as a regressor. And then FNIRS is a very versatile technique. We have the CAP, which I will show you in a minute. The application of FNIRS is very wide, so we can use it together with EEG. There are people using a lot for some social studies, some hyperscanning, also all type of experiments which involve a lot of movements, because it's quite stable for movement. And also for multimodal application, like inside the MRI scanners, PET, CT, also together with TMS, all type of measurements which you can imagine. And at NIREX, we have the whole scientific platform, so it's not only the device, but the whole infrastructure for your research, which includes both hardware and software. And today, I want to show you, of course, our device and the CAP, and I want to show the turbosatory software, which is online data analysis software, allowing us to do real-time experiments. And then I would like to move, as I have little time left, I would like to move to the application and show you how we do experiments with FNIRS. And then let me switch to my screen. Here you can see the cap, and today I have the motor montage, meaning that I have 16 sources and 16 detectors, which I placed over the motor areas. And then I will just wear the cap. And can you see my screen with Aurora now? Right?
Yes, we can see it. We
Yeah.
can see everything.
Yeah. So what I do is that I just put on the cap, and of course there are a lot of recommendations and some tutorials how you can how you should place the cap. So it follows the EG like 10-20 positions, and you need to align it for the Enian and Nasian and to check the CZ. And I will just show you the simple quick application. So what I have here now is just the device where I connected my optodes and the optodes on the head. And as you can see, the device is quite small. I can stand up, I can move if the experiment require this, but yeah. And then on the screen now you can see my montage. So as I mentioned, it's a motor montage for both sides. And now I will start, before starting the signal recording, I will start the signal optimization. And what is happening at the moment is that the software tries to adjust the brightness of each of the source depending on how much hairs I have, what is the brain area. So we have several steps here, and if the signal is good, and if, for example, I'm a blonde and I don't need a lot of source brightness, light can easily pass through my hair, they're thin and blonde, and therefore you can see I have quite excellent signal optimization results. And the source brightness is here on the left. You can see that not all of them require the full capacity. So some sources, they work very well already on 14%. And then let me show you the signal. And this is recording of the signal. So what you can see here on the screen is two color lines. One is red, one is blue, and they stand for oxygenated and deoxygenated hemoglobin. Those are hemoglobin changes. We also can check the raw amplitude for each of the wavelength. And what you can see here is the relative changes of oxygenated and deoxygenated hemoglobin. And one of the indicator of the good quality of FNIRS is when you can see on your data the very clear heartbeat. This 1 hertz waves that you can see. And then yes, as you can see, I'm talking, so I'm moving a lot of my jaw, and the signal is quite stable. If the cap is prepared properly, if all the cables are saved on the space, then the system is very robust for any motion signals. And then this is just how the data look like, and what I want to show you today is the real-time software analysis. Let me open it again. So it's called Turbo Satori. And the system is, we have the whole integrated infrastructure here, and the device is connected to LSL, so it has a native LSL integration, and we can just connect everything to one network, and everything is synchronized. So here you can see the window of Turbo Satori, and the windows are a little bit overwhelming, I know, but I will just guide you very briefly through them. So what we have here is that Turbo Satori is automatically connected to Aurora, this data recording software, and what we need to choose is just the protocol that we want to run, protocol of experiment. So I will show you briefly the simple experiment of left and right finger tapping task. And then let me stop and start. So as you can see, Turbo Satori connects to Aurora. And now it is connected. So what this Turbo Satori is doing is it performs the online data preprocessing. So meaning that we can apply the filters for online data and all the motion correction, all the trending and some GLM filters. For finger tapping is not really, not cleaning is needed. But let me start the experiment. Okay, can you see my screen well?
Yes,
Okay,
of course.
I have some problems with visualization.
Okay, no worries, take your time.
Let me change my screen sharing. So now you can see the Turbo Satori, and I ran the data collection. Let me stop for a second and start again. And here I will show you a very simple experiment of finger tapping. The red and blue will be the task, so where I will start the movement of left and right finger. And here you can see how the signal goes. I will do a couple of blocks just to show you that. Okay, let me just stop here for the sake of time. So I will just explain what we can see. On the low part, you see the montage as well, and you can choose each of the channel here to see the real-time activity, and you can use it, for example, for localizer experiment. If you don't know which channel would be activated, you can just perform several blocks of finger tapping and see which has the highest statistics. And statistics is calculated also real time. So here on the left you can see that we can check all the beta values for oxygenated and deoxygenated hemoglobin, but also perform some online t-test and different correlations like between the channel, positive and negative correlation. And of course we have two type of conditions here. So like we have blue as a left finger tapping and red as a right finger tapping, and we can also perform all the contrasts at the same time and see where on which channels and which brain location that we had the highest activity. And as a localizer experiment that I've mentioned, we can use, for example, the for red, I think I did the left channel. So yes, that was the right channel. And here, for example, now I chose the right finger tapping, and I can just choose the channel which had the highest correlation with my GLM function. So here, for example, you can see the HRF, so the predicted signal, and the turbosatory is able to do the online analysis from the real signal that we get to the GLM hemodynamic response. And yeah, of course, here you can see the average with some error intervals, and you can decide which channel, for example, to use. And when you know which channel to use, you can apply it for some neurofeedbacks, because we have also some plugin and some the scale where I will just run it briefly again. So you can also use it for the neurofeedback to tell the subject how successful he is in the performing the task. So now I'm using neurofeedback on this selected channel. And for that, for example, I can show you how okay, I'm talking too much at the moment. So yeah, that is just an example how to use. And with that, I think I finished. That's a very easy to use tool, which is all synchronized with Aurora and all our devices. And we have a lot of good use of turbosatory. For example, for neurofeedback, it's very useful in the clinic. We have a recent published study on neurofeedback with FNIRS for patients with disorders of consciousness. So those who are mostly like in locked-in syndrome, when they lost all their functions, but the brain is still active. So they applied FNIRS with the simple task, and they were able to register their responses using FNIRS. And there are also a lot of applications. I will just continue with my presentation. We have a, because FNIRS is very, wait, I will change the screens again. So FNIRS is a very versatile device. You can use it together, as I mentioned, with all type of multimodal techniques like fMRI inside the scanners, with EEG, but also with some VR glasses. It's very easy to use, and the technique is very robust to any electromagnetic environment. It's also non-invasive, it's safe for infants, for patients, for very sensitive patients like disorders of consciousness, for example. And it's just noiseless and very low cost compared to MRI scanners. And if you're interested in more neurofeedback studies, I would encourage you to visit our website. We have a publication list there with all the applications of FNIRS and neurofeedback. And we also have a YouTube channel. It's very useful. There are a lot of tutorials of how to use the techniques, but also a lot of webinars with FNIRS and any other type of applications. And with that, I will finish my presentation. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Irina. Thank you very much. It was an amazing opportunity to see FNIRS actually in real time and how this can be utilized for neurofeedback purposes. What I would like to say that I want something to point out. What I liked a lot in the application of this neurofeedback demo is that in the market there are not so many devices that can utilize FNIRS for neurofeedback purposes or real-time, let's say, monitoring of FNIRS signals, and especially with so many optos and so many channels. There may be some with much less, for example, but not full scalp and so on, where you can train various sites on the brain simultaneously and so on. Thank you very much for this insight. I think that was something very, very important to show in the students, because we have a lot of students that participate in this kind of event, as well as the other people. There is one question from the audience that I am going to answer this because I don't think that it falls to our let's say area. It's about a sort of kind of breath work and how this affects it's a specific, let's say, breath work and how it affects the brain oxygen levels, and if from neuropsychological or neuroscientific perspective, if this kind of breathing influences the brain, if it's considered safe or scientifically grounded and so on. We cannot answer all these questions now because I think that when we are on such events, scientific events, we need to bring some scientific evidence on this. That, to be honest, I don't think that they exist about the safety of a breathing procedure or about how one breathing procedure or another breathing procedure influence the brain. To be honest, I'm not aware of studies around this, so I will pass these questions and I'm not going to, let's say, discuss it more. Lina, I have only one question for this.
Yes.
With this, let's say, I see and I understand that one big problem we have in typically, let me tell you something, neurofeedback is done with EEG, okay, which is widely used worldwide, let's say that. However, in EEG we face with the current machines very many problems in EEG, let's say, quality, in the quality of the EEG signals. And these are tremendously reduced using the conductivity gel. However, this conductivity gel is not always welcome from the patients or the users. Now, you mentioned something that probably many people didn't catch it so easily. We saw very good signals in you because you are blonde. Your hair does not block the light of the optoid. In cases, what do you think, in cases where we have dark hair people, this will cause a problem? What is your, because I know that you have a lot of experience on this, that's why I'm asking.
Yes, that's a very good question, and that's one of the main, let's say, challenge for FNIRS technique in general, and for that you need a very advanced hardware devices. And that's why, like, our solution for having dark hair is that we have a special spring tops. Those are this black devices, let's say, like just tops. and they are meant not just to keep the optodes on place, but they also have a spring inside. And this string has different tensions. So we have the 4 different tensions of the strings, and depending on the how dense hair are, how dark they are, you can use like this balance between the comfort for patients and also the signal quality. And another an advancement that we have is that we are using for all our sources and detectors. I'm not sure if you can see it here properly, but we have dual tips optodes, and that allows us to go through the hairs very effectively. So just by pressing them, the hair stands somewhere in between, and it just passes through the hair. And for that, we don't need any gel and like we use in EEG. We have, of course, the customers everywhere in the world, and also in some African countries where they have not only the dark hair, but they're also curly and very, they're very dense and curly. And that is one of the, I would say, most challenging hairs for FNIRs. And they have different techniques, of course. They do some braids and place the optodes in between those braids. We even have a webinar also. On our website, there is a webinar how FNIRS is applied on African population, and they get quite good signal quality also with our devices. So if you are very interested, you can find it on our YouTube channel.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you very, very, very much, Lina. Is there any another question? I don't see another question. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here. So now we have actually a break until, let me check the program. The next presentation is on 12:30 by Megan Salt using EEG to measure visual adaptation using target photoreceptors. So there is there is actually 30 minutes break, and then we continue. Thank you very much for your participation in the morning session. See you later.